I'm a 38-year-old male, and I need to get this cluster of a family situation off my chest. Honestly, I don't even know where to begin. I guess it all started back in 1995 when my whole world went to pieces. You know how some kids remember exactly where they were when they found out Santa wasn't real? Well, I remember exactly where I was when I found out my sister wasn't really my sister. I was sitting on our old brown carpet, playing Street Fighter on my Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Yeah, showing my age here. When I heard the screaming start upstairs. This wasn't your regular parents fighting kind of screaming. This was different, the kind that makes your stomach drop, even when you're just a kid. Next thing I know, Dad's thundering down the stairs with Mom running after him, mascara running down her face, begging him to let her explain. See, Dad had found these letters, not emails, it was the 90s. Actual handwritten letters stuffed in the back of Mom's underwear drawer. They were from some guy named Richard at her office, full of all that romantic nonsense and, well, let's just say some pretty explicit stuff that no 10-year-old should ever have to hear his dad read out loud in a rage. But here's the real kicker. The letters went back 6 years, which meant one thing. My 5-year-old sister, Sarah, yeah, not exactly Dad's kid. And the worst part, Mom didn't even try to deny it. She just stood there crying while Dad started pulling out boxes and throwing stuff in them. I remember Mom grabbing his arm saying, "Think about the kids, James. Think about Tommy." That's me, by the way. Dad just looked at her with this empty look and said, "Which one? The one that's actually mine, or the one you've been lying about for 5 years?" The next few days were like living in some weird alternate universe. Dad moved into a Holiday Inn, and suddenly our house was full of relatives taking sides. Aunt Linda, Dad's sister, came over to help him pack more stuff, and ended up getting into this massive screaming match with Mom's best friend, Susan, in our driveway. Real Jerry Springer type, neighbors watching and everything. Then came the DNA test. Dad insisted on it, even though looking at Sarah next to Richard's photo from the company Christmas party, which Dad found in the letters, was like seeing double, same nose, same weirdly attached earlobes, same everything. But Dad needed to be 100% sure before he threw away 15 years of marriage, his words. The day the results came back, something in Dad just broke. He'd been holding on to this tiny hope that maybe, just maybe, Mom was just having an emotional affair, that Sarah was his. When that manila envelope proved otherwise, he stopped fighting Mom for custody of me. That's right, until then, he'd been planning to take me with him, had already enrolled me in a private school near his new apartment and everything. But Mom, she played dirty, threatened to drag out the divorce forever, to tell everyone at his work about how he'd abandoned his family, to make his life a living hell if he tried to take me. So guess who got stuck playing happy family with Mom and her affair child? This guy. Looking back now, I think that's what messed me up the most. Not the affair itself, not even finding out Sarah wasn't really my full sister. It was watching my dad, this guy who taught me to never back down from bullies, to always stand up for what's right. Just give up. He didn't give up on me completely, though. He still paid child support religiously every first of the month, still covered my education, still showed up for the important stuff. But you know what's really messed up? Mom actually expected me to keep calling Richard Uncle Rich when he'd come around after the divorce like, "Lady, we all know this dude's been sleeping with you for years and is Sarah's real dad. Can we drop the pretense?" He never stuck around long term, though. Guess once the thrill of sneaking around was gone, so was the magic. Last I heard, he moved to Florida with some yoga instructor half his age. Sarah was too young to understand any of it at first. Mom fed her some nonsense about Dad going away because grown-ups sometimes need space. As she got older and started asking questions, Mom would just burst into tears and lock herself in her room. Real mature, right? Eventually, Sarah pieced it together from overheard conversations and family gossip. I can't imagine what that must have been like for a kid. The real fun part? Mom got to keep the house in the divorce settlement. Dad just wanted out so badly he didn't even fight it. But let me tell you, maintaining a 4-bedroom house in the Houston suburbs on a diner waitress's salary? Not exactly easy. That's where 10-year-old me came in. You know how in movies, after a divorce, the mom usually steps up and becomes this amazing single parent? Yeah, that didn't happen. Instead, I basically became a 10-year-old adult, while Sarah got promoted to golden child status. Mom's precious baby girl who needed protecting from the big bad world that took her daddy away. Meanwhile, I got to be the kid who looked too much like the man who abandoned us. Mom's words, not mine. The first few months were the worst. Mom started picking up extra shifts at the diner to make ends meet, which meant I was in charge of, well, pretty much everything. Getting Sarah ready for school? That was me. Making sure she did her homework? Me again. Cooking dinner? You guessed it. Good old reliable Tommy. I learned to make spaghetti and meatballs when I was still young enough to need a step stool to reach the stove. Dad's child support checks came like clockwork on the first of every month. They were supposed to cover my expenses, school stuff, clothes, food, basic kid necessities. But somehow, that money kept finding its way into Sarah's dance classes, her new school clothes, her birthday parties. Not that I went without. Dad made sure my private school fees were paid directly to the school, and he'd slip me extra cash during his visits. But watching Mom blow my support money on Sarah's expensive hobbies while I was stuck wearing the same sneakers for 2 years straight, that stings. The real kicker came when I was around 12. Mom sat me down for this serious talk about how we needed to be a team. Translation, I needed to start babysitting Sarah after school and on weekends so Mom could pick up even more shifts. When I pointed out that Dad's support money should be covering a babysitter, Mom burst into tears, her favorite manipulation tactic, and went on this whole rant about how family takes care of family, and how I was just like your father, only thinking about money. Here's a fun example of the double standard. When I was 14, I wanted to try out for the football team. Mom threw a fit about how we couldn't afford the equipment, even though Dad had already offered to pay for it. Her real issue? It would mean I couldn't watch Sarah after school, but that same month, Sarah got to start $200 a month gymnastics classes because she needs an outlet for her energy. The mental gymnastics Mom pulled to justify that one could have won an Olympic medal. I wasn't completely miserable, though. I had this system worked out with Dad where he'd show up at random times to check on me. He couldn't pick me up or take me anywhere, thanks to Mom's threats during the divorce, but he'd park down the street, and we'd talk through the fence during Sarah's gymnastics classes. He'd bring me books, comics, sometimes a new game for my Super Nintendo. Little things that reminded me someone actually cared about what I wanted. The really twisted part? Despite everything, Sarah and I actually got along okay. Not in a close siblings way, but more like reluctant roommates. She knew I resented having to take care of her, but she also knew I was the only stable person in her life. Mom was either working or crying in her room, Uncle Rich had taken off to Florida, and her real dad wanted nothing to do with her. So she'd help me with the dishes sometimes or cover for me when I snuck out to meet Dad. By high school, I had this whole double life thing going. At school, I was this normal kid, decent grades, played football. Dad finally put his foot down about that one, had friends. But at home, I was basically Sarah's substitute parent, making sure she ate vegetables, helping her with pre-algebra, giving her the talk because Mom was too embarrassed. Yeah, that last one was as awkward as it sounds. And Mom? She just kept playing her games. She'd praise Sarah for getting B's while ignoring my straight A's. She'd brag to her friends about Sarah's gymnastics meets, but forget to mention my football games. When Sarah got her first period, Mom took 3 days off work to support her through this transition. When I broke my arm at a game, she sent our neighbor to pick me up from the hospital because she couldn't miss her shift. The cherry on top? When I got my first job at 16, GameStop employee discount on games was clutch. Mom actually suggested I should contribute to the household since I was making my own money now. Meanwhile, Sarah got a sweet 16 party with a DJ and catering, all funded by, you guessed it, my child support money. Looking back, I think the worst part wasn't even the responsibility or the double standards. It was watching Mom systematically try to erase every trace of Dad from our lives while simultaneously using his money to spoil her affair child. She even made Sarah call him James instead of Dad, like he was some random dude who'd crashed on our couch for a few years. By junior year, I was working at GameStop, plus doing lawn work on weekends, and still maintaining straight A's because I knew education was my ticket out. Dad's child support meant I didn't really need the money, but I was squirreling away every penny I could. Mom didn't know about my lawn job. I told her I was at football practice. The GameStop money went to household contributions, also known as Sarah's expenses, but the lawn money? That went straight into a secret account at a different bank. The summer before senior year was when everything changed. I was closing up at GameStop one night when this guy came in. Turned out he was a regular customer's dad and owned a pretty successful real estate company. We got talking about college plans, and next thing I know, he's offering me a part-time job doing basic office work for way better money than GameStop. But here's the catch. It would mean no more being Sarah's after-school babysitter. When I told Mom about the job opportunity, she completely lost it. I mean, full-on nuclear meltdown. How could you be so selfish? What about your sister? This family needs you. I stood my ground for once and said I was taking the job. That's when she dropped the bomb. If I took the job, I'd have to start paying rent. She actually thought this would stop me. Joke's on her, though, because the real estate job paid enough to cover her crazy rent demands and still let me save more than before. The real estate job changed everything. My boss, let's call him Mr. B, became kind of a mentor to me. He'd gone through a similar family situation and just got it, you know? He helped me apply to colleges. Mom was useless with that stuff. Wrote my recommendation letters, and even helped me figure out scholarship applications. By spring, I had a full ride to the University of Texas for business school. When I told Mom I was going to college in Austin, she tried every manipulation tactic in her book. First came the tears. How could you abandon your family like your father did? Then the guilt trips. Sarah needs her big brother. Then the threats. Don't expect to be welcomed back here if you leave. I just kept thinking about the account she didn't know about, with 3 years of lawn mowing money in it. The day I moved out was like something from a bad TV movie. Mom was alternating between crying and screaming. Sarah was hiding in her room, and I was trying to get my stuff out before Mom could find some way to stop me. Dad showed up to help. First time he'd been to the house in years, and Mom completely lost it. She started throwing things, called the cops, saying he was trespassing. They didn't do anything since I had invited him. The best part? As I was loading the last box into Dad's truck, Sarah came running out. She hugged me, first time in years, and slipped me a note. It said, "I'm sorry she's like this. Thanks for everything." Made me feel like maybe those years of being her substitute parent weren't completely wasted. College was like entering a different universe. Suddenly, I could just exist. No one needed me to be their parent. No one was guilting me about money or family obligations. I could study what I wanted, hang out with friends without checking my phone every 5 minutes, even date without Mom interrogating every girl who looked at me. I went to therapy, the university offered it for free, joined some clubs, and started figuring out who I actually was when I wasn't being Mom's emotional support animal. Mom tried to keep her hooks in me, though. Every few weeks, she'd call with some new crisis that only I could solve. Sarah's having trouble in school, the car broke down, the electricity might get shut off. Each time, the solution was always money. I started setting boundaries, first time in my life, really. Told her I'd help Sarah with homework over the phone, but I wasn't sending any more cash. The real kicker came during my sophomore year. Sarah called me crying because Mom had taken the money she'd saved from her summer job, about $800 to pay bills, said she needed it more than Sarah needed to buy a homecoming dress. That's when I realized Mom hadn't changed. She just lost her favorite ATM, me, and was now using Sarah the same way she'd used my child support money. I helped Sarah set up her own bank account that Mom couldn't access and taught her how to hide money like I had. It was the first time we really felt like actual siblings, instead of just two kids trapped in Mom's drama. She even started coming to visit me in Austin sometimes, away from Mom's influence. By the time I graduated, I had a job lined up with a big commercial real estate firm in Houston, thanks to Mr. B's recommendation. A serious girlfriend, now my wife, and enough savings to get my own place. Mom tried to suggest I move back home to save money, but that ship had sailed about 4 years and lots of therapy sessions ago. My late 20s were pretty good, not going to lie. Got married to my college girlfriend, Rachel. She's a freaking saint for putting up with my family drama. Bought a house in a decent neighborhood. Started making actual good money. Dad was thriving too. He'd built up this impressive real estate portfolio and remarried to this awesome lady named Janet, who had my back from day one. Things with Mom and Sarah were complicated. Sarah had finally moved out of Mom's house, thank God, and was trying to figure out her life. Mom had upgraded from diner manager to owning her own small catering business, which you'd think would mean she'd stop asking me for money. Spoiler alert, it didn't. But the real story here is about Dad. We'd gotten super close over the years. He'd come over every Sunday for what Rachel called our man cave sessions, basically us watching football, grilling steaks, and talking about everything from work to life. He became the kind of father I needed when I was a kid, just 20 years late. Then came 2022. Dad started losing weight, like a lot of weight. Janet noticed first, said he wasn't eating much and was tired all the time. I kept pushing him to see a doctor, but he'd brush it off with that typical dad stuff, just working too hard or must have been something I ate. Finally, in March, he collapsed at work, rushed to the hospital, lots of tests, and boom, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. If you know anything about pancreatic cancer, you know that's basically a death sentence. The doctors gave him 6 months, he made it 4. Those last months though, man, Dad turned into this completely different person, not in a bad way, but it was like all the walls came down. He started telling me everything about the divorce, about why he really let Mom keep me, about his regrets. Turns out, he'd wanted to fight harder for custody. But his lawyer told him that in the 90s, courts almost always sided with mothers. Plus, Mom had threatened to tell his business partners about Sarah not being his, which back then could have ruined his reputation. The really gut-wrenching part? He apologized to me, said he was sorry for not being stronger, for not protecting me from becoming Mom's substitute husband or parent. I tried to tell him it wasn't his fault, but he just kept saying he should have found a way. About 2 months before he died, he called me to his house for a business meeting. That's when he laid it all out. He was leaving me everything: the house, his investment portfolio, his share in the real estate company, about $350,000 in various accounts. Janet already had her own money and fully supported his decision. He made me promise two things. One, I'd use some of the money to finally do something for myself, not for Mom or Sarah. Two, I wouldn't tell Mom or Sarah about the inheritance until after he was gone. I tried to argue, especially about Janet, but he shut me down, said Janet had been part of the decision and had her own wealth from her first marriage. Then he hit me with the real knockout. You're my only child, Tommy. The only one I'm sure is mine. The only one I failed when you needed me. Let me try to make it right. The last few weeks were rough. The cancer took him fast at the end. But you know what's crazy? Even through all the pain, he was still trying to protect me. Made sure all the paperwork was ironclad so Mom couldn't contest anything. Set up the trust so she couldn't guilt me into giving her access. He knew her better than I thought. Dad passed on a Sunday. We were watching the Texans game in his hospital room when he just stopped breathing. Janet was getting coffee, the nurses were changing shifts, it was just me and him. Last thing he said, "You're a better man than I ever was, kid." Still messes me up thinking about it. The funeral was tense as anything. Mom showed up uninvited with Sarah, made this big scene about being the grieving first wife until Janet shut that down real quick. I didn't tell them about the inheritance at the funeral. Waited about a month. Thought maybe they'd show some actual grief or something. So there I was, about 3 months after Dad's funeral, finally starting to feel somewhat normal again, when Mom calls me crying, like full-on ugly crying where you can barely understand what they're saying between sobs. She tells me Sarah's been diagnosed with some rare spinal condition that needs immediate surgery. Insurance won't cover it because it's experimental or some nonsense like that. They need about $45,000. Now, I'm not completely heartless. Sarah is still my sister, even if we're only half-siblings. Plus, I just inherited a decent chunk of change from Dad. But something felt off. Maybe it was all those years of Mom's manipulation, or maybe it was Dad's voice in my head telling me to be careful, but I didn't just write a check. Instead, I told Mom I'd help but needed to see the medical documentation first. She got weird about it, saying the doctor was really busy and it would take time to get the paperwork together. Red flag number 1. Then she starts pushing for at least a partial payment to hold Sarah's surgery slot. Red flag number 2. I'm not proud of what I did next, but after years of Mom's nonsense, can you blame me? I set up this whole elaborate system to track where my money was going. Opened a new account at a different bank. Told Mom I'd transfer money there in installments as they got the medical paperwork together. First installment, $15,000. The money disappeared within 48 hours of hitting that account. Not to a hospital or medical office. Nope. It went to something called Dream Day Events. A quick Google search showed it was a high-end wedding planning company in Houston, but I didn't confront them yet. I wanted to see how deep this rabbit hole went. 2 weeks later, Mom calls again. More tears, more drama. The doctor needs another installment to order special equipment for Sarah's surgery. I transfer another $10,000. This time, the money goes to some designer boutique and a catering company. Here's where it gets wild. So, I had this buddy, Mike, from the real estate firm. His wife, Lisa, works for this fancy hotel downtown. She calls me out of the blue one day. "Hey, Tommy, didn't know Sarah was getting married. Just saw her booking for the grand ballroom. Must be dropping some serious cash. That venue alone is like $30,000. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Not because of the money, honestly, I could afford it. But the lying, the manipulation, using a fake medical emergency to fund a wedding I wasn't even invited to, that hurt. But wait, it gets better. I start doing some digging. Sarah's been dating this guy, Travis, for about 6 months. Real trust fund baby type, family owns half of downtown Houston or something. Turns out, Sarah's been telling him and his family this whole sob story about growing up without a father, conveniently leaving out the whole affair part, struggling to make ends meet, but staying strong through adversity. She even told them Dad was her real father and had died when she was little. I called Janet, Dad's widow, to vent about it. That's when she dropped another bomb. She'd run into Sarah at some charity event a few weeks before Dad died. Sarah had introduced herself as James Wilson's daughter, using Dad's name, and spent the whole evening telling people about her wonderful father who was tragically ill. Janet said she was so shocked she couldn't even call her out on it. The real kicker? I found their wedding website, guest list of 200 people, 5-course dinner, live band, designer dress, the works. Total cost? Probably around $80,000 to $90,000 when all said and done. And guess who wasn't on the guest list? Yep, me. The guy they were scamming to pay for everything. Complicated family situation? That's what she called lying about paternity for 30+ years, scamming me out of thousands and planning this whole fake wedding backstory. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was realizing that, after all these years, nothing had changed. Mom was still lying, still manipulating, still using me as her personal ATM. And Sarah? She'd learned from the best. I sat on this information for a few days, watching more money requests roll in for various medical expenses. Each time, the money would disappear into another wedding expense. They really thought they were pulling off this perfect scam. Well, they thought wrong. See, growing up with a manipulator like Mom taught me one thing: timing is everything. And thanks to Dad's careful estate planning and some very expensive lawyers, I had more control over this situation than they realized. First thing I did was document everything, every text, every call, every transfer. I recorded our phone conversations, legal in Texas with one-party consent. I even had screenshots from their wedding website and all the vendor contracts they'd signed using my money. Build the case first, then drop the bomb. That was the plan. Then I got a call that pushed me over the edge. It was Travis's mom, Sarah's future mother-in-law, calling my wife to invite us to some fancy pre-wedding brunch. Apparently, Sarah had been showing off pictures of me and Rachel's kids to Travis's family, calling them her beloved niece and nephew who she practically raised. This woman had no idea I didn't even know about the wedding until then. Rachel, blessed her heart, played dumb and got all the details. The whole story Sarah had spun was insane. According to her, Dad was this amazing father who died tragically when she was young. Remember, he actually just died a few months ago and wasn't even her real dad. Mom was this strong single mother who sacrificed everything for her children. And me? I was her successful but tragically distant brother, who she hoped would come around for the wedding. That was it. That was my breaking point. I called the bank and froze the account I'd been using to send them money. Then I contacted every vendor I could track down, the venue, the caterer, the florist, the band, and explained that the payments they'd received were under fraudulent pretenses. Most of them were surprisingly understanding, probably because they deal with family drama all the time. Then I waited for the inevitable explosion. It took exactly 2 days. Mom called first, screaming about how the venue had called her, saying their payment had been flagged for fraud. She tried her usual guilt trips. How could you do this to your sister after everything we've been through as a family? I stayed calm and asked her one question: how's Sarah's spine condition doing? Dead silence. Then she switched tactics, started crying about how they just wanted Sarah to have one perfect day, how Travis's family would never accept her if they knew. The truth about her background, how I was being selfish with Dad's money. Ironic, considering he wasn't even Sarah's father. I let her rant, then I played her the recording of her admitting the medical emergency was fake. Told her I had documented every lie, every manipulation, every fraudulent request. Reminded her that fraud is a criminal offense. She hung up on me. Sarah was next. She left this long, tearful voicemail about how I was ruining her one chance at happiness, how Travis's family would look down on her if she couldn't. Give them the wedding they expected, how she'd always looked up to me, that was news to me, and how she'd pay me back someday. I texted her back one thing: guess lying runs in your side of the family. Harsh? Maybe, but I was done being their ATM. The real drama started when vendors began canceling. See, they'd signed all these contracts assuming they had the money, my money, to pay for everything. Without those payments, everything started falling apart. The venue needed the next installment. The caterer wanted their deposit. The florist was threatening to pull out. Mom tried damage control, called every family member, asking for loans, even tried reaching out to Janet, Dad's widow, for help. That took some nerve. But Janet, amazing woman that she is, just replied, "I think Tommy's father would be proud of him for standing up for himself." Then came the nuclear option. Mom threatened to tell Travis and his family everything, including about Dad's inheritance. I laughed and said, "Go ahead." Turns out Travis's family is big in real estate. They knew Dad. They knew he had one kid, me. All Sarah's lies would unravel if Mom opened that can of worms. The best part? Travis's mom called Rachel again, all worried about why we seemed hesitant about the pre-wedding brunch. Rachel, who by this point had my full permission to go nuclear, told her the whole story. Everything, the affair, the fake dad story, the scam for wedding money, all of it. Guess who called off the engagement the next day? Yep, Travis. He called off the engagement. Turns out, rich guys don't like being lied to. Who knew? Everything went into complete meltdown mode. Sarah had already quit her retail job, convinced she was about to marry into money. Mom had maxed out 2 credit cards on non-refundable wedding deposits. Their perfect little scam had blown up in their faces, and they were both desperate. So after Travis called off the engagement, you'd think Mom and Sarah would finally back off, right? Nope. Instead, they doubled down on the crazy, like Olympic-level mental gymnastics. First came the guilt bombing. My phone basically exploded with messages from random family members I haven't talked to in years. Apparently, Mom went on this massive smear campaign telling everyone I destroyed Sarah's chance at happiness out of jealousy. She conveniently left out the part about scamming me for tens of thousands of dollars with fake medical emergencies. The best part? Sarah actually showed up at my house, just drove 6 hours from Houston to Ohio, looking like a mess, crying about how she'd lost everything because of me. My wife took one look at her and said, "The audacity of this girl." Before I could even react, Sarah tried to push past her into our house, saying she needed to talk to her brother. I came to the door, and she launched into this whole speech about how she'd always looked up to me, news to me, and how she just wanted one. Perfect day with my money. Then she dropped the real reason for her visit. She needed $25,000 to pay off the wedding vendors, or they'd sue her. I just laughed, told her that sounds like a her problem. She actually stamped her foot like a toddler and screamed, "You have Dad's money, you have to help me." I reminded her that she spent years telling everyone he wasn't her dad, so she could keep that same energy now. Mom's reaction was even better. She started calling my work, my wife's work, even tried to contact some of my clients. Thank God for good secretaries who screen calls. Her new story was that I had stolen Sarah's medical fund, and now she was suffering because of me. Lady really thought she could spin using fake medical emergencies to fund a wedding into me being the bad guy. The real kicker came when they found out Travis's family was suing them for fraud. See, they'd signed all these contracts with vendors under false pretenses, using Travis's family name to secure better rates. His parents were furious about being associated with this mess. Mom's solution? She tried to remortgage her house to pay for everything. But remember that house? The one Dad let her keep in the divorce? Turns out she'd already taken out 3 equity loans against it over the years. She couldn't get another dime, so guess who she turned to? Yep, back to her personal ATM. But this time was different. She wasn't asking, she was demanding. Said I owed the family for abandoning them just like Dad did, that if I didn't help, they'd lose the house, and it would be all my fault. I sent her one text, sounds like karma to me. Then I blocked her number. Sarah's still trying to salvage her reputation. She made this long Facebook post about forgiving family members who hurt you and how money changes people. The comments were full of flying monkeys saying how strong she was for handling this betrayal. I just downloaded all our text conversations about the fake medical emergency and kept them ready, just in case she wants to push that narrative further. The latest? They're both telling anyone who will listen that I'm hoarding Dad's money and destroying the family. Meanwhile, they're facing lawsuits from 3 different vendors. Travis's family is considering legal action for defamation, and that house they've been living in? Going into foreclosure next month. Janet, Dad's widow, called me last week. Said Dad would be proud of me for finally standing up to them. She's right. He spent years trying to protect me from their manipulation, and now I'm finally protecting myself. So here we are. Mom and Sarah are facing the consequences of their actions for probably the first time in their lives. They're still trying to guilt me into bailing them out, but I'm done being their emergency fund. My wife and kids are my family now, and I'm using Dad's inheritance the way he wanted, for my family's future.